The city never really sleeps, but Ethan Cole had mastered the art of sleeping through his own life. New York was alive in ways that made people feel small and powerful at the same time. Lights stretching into the sky. Sirens cutting through midnight silence. Dreams being built in glass towers while others broke quietly in the shadows below. Ethan wasn't part of either side. He was in between. Not failing loudly enough to be noticed. Not succeeding loudly enough to be remembered. At 24, he lived in a small rented apartment in Queens, the kind of place where everything worked but nothing felt like it belonged to you. The walls were pale, the air slightly dry, and the silence always felt temporary, like life was waiting to interrupt it. Every morning started the same way. Alarm. Snooze. Alarm again. Then the ceiling. Ethan would lie there staring upward, not because he was tired, but because movement felt heavier than thought. His mind would already be awake before his body agreed to participate. Same day again. That thought used to scare him, now it just felt like description. He would finally get up, brush his teeth, wash his face, move through routine like a script he never wrote but somehow had to perform every day. Clothes were simple. Neutral. Forgettable. Not because he wanted to be invisible, but because standing out required energy he didn't feel like he owned. The subway into Manhattan was always crowded in the same emotional way, people close, but not connected. Everyone moving, but not necessarily going anywhere they chose with intention. Ethan used to wonder about people's lives, now he mostly assumed they were just better at pretending than him. At work, he sat in a digital marketing company surrounded by people who spoke in metrics like they were speaking a second language: engagement rates, conversions, impressions, optimization. Everything sounded important. Nothing felt meaningful. His job wasn't bad. That was the worst part. It was just stable enough to make leaving feel irresponsible and just empty enough to make staying feel like slow disappearance. His manager once told him, "You're reliable, Ethan. Just don't overthink things." It was said casually, almost kindly. But Ethan heard something else underneath it. Stay where you are useful, not where you are different. And without realizing it, he obeyed. Not loudly. Quietly. That's how most people get stuck. Not through failure. Through silent agreement with limitation. Weeks blended into each other until time stopped feeling like movement and started feeling like repetition. Work. Home. Sleep. Scroll. Repeat. The scroll was the part Ethan never questioned. Social media wasn't entertainment anymore. It was comparison disguised as routine. A quick check during lunch. A few minutes before bed. Harmless. At first. But slowly, it became a mirror he didn't realize was distorted. One afternoon, he sat in the office cafeteria with cold food and a heavier mind than usual. His phone unlocked without intention. Thumb moved automatically. First post, someone from college announcing a promotion. Second post, travel photos from Tokyo, someone smiling under neon lights like life had background music. Third post, a startup founder his age talking about freedom, risk, and building something meaningful. Ethan didn't feel hatred. That would have been easier. What he felt was quieter. Displacement. Like everyone else had been given instructions he never received. He turned his phone off and sat still for a moment longer than usual. And in that stillness, a thought formed without asking permission. I am not behind. I am paused. He didn't know where it came from. But it stayed. That night, New York felt louder than usual. Even indoors. Even with windows closed. Ethan walked home slower, not because he was tired physically, but because his mind was processing something it couldn't fully translate yet. On the sidewalk, people passed him in different directions like currents in a river that knew where it was going. He didn't. By the time he reached his apartment, the silence inside didn't feel peaceful. It felt exposed. He didn't turn on the lights immediately. Sat on the edge of his bed instead. Phone face down. Breathing steady but shallow. And then the thought returned again, clearer this time. Is this it? Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just observational. Like noticing a pattern in a system. That question didn't bring panic. It brought something worse. Clarity. Because panic suggests confusion. Clarity suggests recognition. That night, sleep came late and fragmented. Not nightmares exactly, more like mental replay. Every delayed decision. Every avoided risk. Every moment he said, "Not now," when something inside him quietly said, "Do it." And slowly, something began to reveal itself. Not a failure. A pattern. Ethan wasn't someone who lacked ambition. He was someone who interrupted his own ambition at the exact moment it required discomfort. Every time. Without exception. Morning came too quickly. But something inside him had shifted overnight. He woke earlier than usual, not because he chose to, but because his mind refused to stay passive. The ceiling again. But this time, the thoughts were different. Same life. Then a pause. Or same interpretation. That pause mattered. He sat up slowly, like testing a new version of himself. Nothing outside had changed. But something internal had. At work that day, everything looked the same, but felt slightly misaligned. Like watching a familiar movie but noticing details you never saw before. He started observing himself more than his environment. How quickly he dismissed ideas. How often he assumed he would fail before trying. How easily he agreed with limitations that were never actually enforced, only suggested. It wasn't laziness. It was prediction. His mind was predicting outcomes before reality had a chance to form them. And those predictions became decisions. At lunch, instead of immediately scrolling, he placed his phone face down. That small act felt uncomfortable. Not because something external changed. But because internal dependence was being interrupted. And interruption always feels like withdrawal before it feels like freedom. On the subway home that evening, something happened that didn't look significant from the outside. But inside Ethan, it registered deeply. A teenager across from him was sketching in a worn notebook. No performance. No hesitation. No checking if it was good enough. Just creating. Completely absorbed. Ethan watched longer than he intended. There was something unfamiliar in that focus. Not talent. Not success. Presence. When the train stopped, the teenager got up quickly and left, accidentally dropping the notebook. Ethan picked it up. He could have returned it later. But curiosity opened it first. Inside were unfinished sketches, ideas, fragmented thoughts, half-formed worlds that didn't care about judgment yet. They weren't polished. But they were alive. And that word hit Ethan harder than expected. Alive. Because that was the one thing he couldn't describe about his own routine. He closed the notebook and held it through the rest of the ride. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about what he lacked. He was noticing what he had stopped doing. That night, he sat at his desk. Laptop open. Blank screen. Waiting. He didn't know what he was going to write. But he knew silence wasn't an option anymore. After a long pause, his fingers moved. What if I am not stuck, but repeating the same mental script every day? He stopped. Read it again. Something shifted, not emotionally explosive, but structurally. Like a door slightly unlocking inside perception. Because if repetition created his current life, then repetition could also recreate it. He leaned back. And for the first time, the question changed. Not, why am I like this? But, what have I been practicing mentally every day without realizing it? That question didn't comfort him. It exposed him. And exposure is the beginning of awareness. Before sleeping, he wrote one final line. I don't need a new life tomorrow. I need a new pattern today. He closed his laptop. Outside, New York continued its chaos. Inside, Ethan experienced something new. Not peace. Not transformation. Awareness. And awareness is where reality begins to loosen its grip. Because your mindset doesn't just reflect your world. It trains it. Quietly. Repeatedly. Until it becomes what you call reality. Ethan didn't wake up transformed. That's the part most people misunderstand about change. There was no cinematic moment where everything suddenly made sense. No alarm in his mind announcing a new version unlocked. No sudden confidence, no glowing clarity, no dramatic shift in personality. Just morning. Just the same ceiling. Just the same city waiting outside his window like it always had. But something inside him no longer accepted same as an excuse to stay the same. He sat up slowly, staring at his hands for a moment like they belonged to someone he was still getting to know. Yesterday's thought came back quietly. I don't need a new life tomorrow. I need a new pattern today. That sentence didn't feel inspiring anymore. It felt like responsibility. And responsibility changes how silence feels. Ethan got up, but instead of reaching for his phone first like usual, he paused. His hand hovered in the air for a second. That pause mattered more than it should have. Because for the first time, he noticed something simple but uncomfortable. His first action of the day wasn't chosen. It was automated. And anything automated can be reprogrammed. He put the phone back down. Not dramatically. Just slightly away from reach. Then he brushed his teeth slower than usual, as if his awareness was catching up with his body. Even the mirror felt different. Not because he looked different, but because he was finally seeing without rushing past himself. At work, the world was unchanged. But Ethan wasn't. Or at least, something in him had started observing instead of absorbing. Emails still arrived. Meetings still happened. Deadlines still existed. But now, between stimulus and reaction, there was a gap. A small one. Almost invisible. But real. And in that gap, Ethan started noticing the mechanics of his own thinking. Every time a task felt slightly difficult, a thought appeared, this might not go well. Every time he had an idea, it's probably not worth it. Every time he considered doing something differently, just stick to what you know. Before, these thoughts were invisible instructions. Now they were visible patterns. And anything visible can be questioned. That evening, instead of going straight home and collapsing into routine, Ethan sat in a small cafe near the subway station. Not because he had somewhere important to be, but because he was practicing something new. Presence without escape. He opened his laptop. Blank page again. But this time, he didn't wait for inspiration. He wrote something simple. Today I noticed I think before I act. And most of my thoughts are warnings, not truths. He stared at it. No emotional reaction. Just recognition. Then he added another line. If my thoughts are repeated scripts, then I can write new ones. It sounded simple. Too simple. But simplicity is often what the mind rejects first when it has been trained in complexity as avoidance. He closed the laptop and walked home slowly. The city was still loud. Still fast. Still indifferent. But Ethan wasn't matching its speed anymore. He was observing it. And observation is the beginning of separation from old identity. Days passed like this. Not dramatically different. But internally different in layers too subtle to explain easily. He started noticing how often he sought distraction when discomfort appeared. How quickly he reached for validation through social media. How frequently he postponed action until he felt ready. And he realized something uncomfortable. He was not lacking discipline. He was negotiating with fear. Fear disguised itself as planning. Fear disguised itself as timing. Fear disguised itself as logic. And Ethan had been treating fear like advice. One night, something shifted again. Not externally. Internally. He was sitting at his desk after work, exhausted but alert in a strange way. His laptop was open, but he wasn't working. He was thinking. And thoughts were louder than usual. You're not consistent enough. You always start and stop. Nothing ever sticks with you. These thoughts felt familiar. But then something new happened. Another voice, not loud, not powerful, but stable. These are not facts. These are patterns repeating. Ethan blinked. Because for the first time, he didn't argue with the thoughts. He identified them. And identification is the first step toward control. He leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he didn't try to fix anything. He just watched his mind generate old scripts. And in that watching, something unexpected happened. Distance. Not emotional suppression. Not avoidance. Distance. As if he was no longer inside the thought, but observing it from slightly above. That night, he didn't write anything profound. He just wrote, "I am not my thoughts. I am the observer of them." Then he closed the laptop. And for the first time, sleep came easier, not because life was solved, but because internal resistance had softened slightly. But transformation is never linear. The next morning tested him. Old patterns don't disappear. They return to see if you still believe in them. Ethan woke up late. Missed his intended morning routine, reached for his phone automatically before he even fully opened his eyes. And instantly, he felt it. The slip. The return. Same life again. That thought appeared immediately. And for a moment, it felt like failure. But something else happened too. He paused. Not perfectly. Not gracefully. But noticeably. And in that pause, he remembered something he had written. Patterns can be interrupted. He didn't erase the mistake. He didn't reset the day. He just continued differently from that point forward. And that mattered more than perfection. At work, he made a small decision. One he would normally avoid. During a meeting, when his manager asked for ideas on improving a campaign, Ethan usually stayed quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he had trained himself to believe his input needed to be fully formed before it was valid. That day, something changed. He spoke. Not perfectly. Not confidently. But clearly enough. I think we're overcomplicating the targeting. We might get better engagement if we simplify the audience segments instead of expanding them. Silence followed. A short one. Then a nod from his manager. Try it. Run a small test. It was not applause. It was not recognition. It was permission to experiment. But for Ethan, it felt like something else entirely. Proof that action does not require emotional certainty. Only willingness. That evening, something small but powerful settled inside him. Not confidence. Not success. But evidence. Evidence that action changes internal belief faster than thought ever can. Weeks began to shift slowly. Not dramatically. But structurally. He started testing small ideas in his work instead of waiting for perfect certainty. He reduced social media without forcing himself to quit. He began writing thoughts more often, not for output, but for clarity. And gradually, something strange happened. His internal voice began to change tone. Not instantly. Not completely. But noticeably. Less absolute. More questioning. Less predictive. More observational. One evening, while walking home, Ethan realized something subtle but profound. The city hadn't changed. His job hadn't changed. His circumstances hadn't changed. But his interpretation of them had. And that changed everything about how they felt. New York was still loud. But it no longer felt like pressure. It felt like movement. And he was no longer completely outside it. He was participating in it. Slowly. Intentionally. One night, months after he first began observing his thoughts, Ethan sat again at his desk. Same apartment. Same chair. Same city outside. But not the same mind inside. He opened his laptop. And wrote one final reflection. My life did not change when my circumstances changed. My life changed when I stopped accepting every thought as instruction. He paused. Then added, reality is not created by what I see. It is created by how I interpret what I see repeatedly. He closed the laptop. And leaned back. There was no final explosion of happiness. No perfect ending feeling. Just quiet understanding. Because the truth was simple. Your mindset does not create reality instantly. It creates repetition. And repetition becomes identity. And identity becomes life. Ethan had not become someone new overnight. He had become someone aware. Your mindset doesn't magically rewrite your life in a moment. It silently trains it. Every repeated thought becomes a direction. Every accepted belief becomes a limitation or a doorway. Every small interruption becomes the beginning of a different identity. You don't need a perfect mindset. You need an observed one. Because the moment you start noticing your thoughts instead of obeying them, you stop living inside a script. And start learning how to rewrite it.